Constraints are placed on columns within tables, and they're used to restrict what values can be entered into those columns. So we've already seen data types which are applied to columns, which restrict the data which can be entered into a column. So this is kind of a constraint. So now we're going to take a look at some other constraints within MySQL which we can place on our columns. So the first constraint we'll look at is the not null constraint, and this means that a column can't contain any null values if we put the not null constraint onto that column. So we saw in our coffee store database that some of our customers didn't provide us with a phone number, and we had a null value placed in the phone number column. But if we had applied the not null constraint to this column, then we wouldn't have been able to place these null values, and we would have required a phone number from our customers. So this is what the not null constraint does to columns. It requires that you have to have a value entered into that column. And then the next one is the unique constraint, and if we apply the unique constraint to a column, that means we can't place any duplicate values of data into that column. So if we tried to enter a value into a column which already contained that value, we would actually get an error and we wouldn't be able to enter that data. So every row of data in that column must be unique if it has the unique constraint applied to that column. And the next two constraints we've actually seen already, so primary key and foreign key. So primary key is a column that uniquely identifies each row of data within the table, and a foreign key is a column which is related to a primary key in another table. So we use foreign keys and primary keys to link tables together. And the next type of constraint is the check constraint. So if we apply a check constraint to a column, this will control the values that can be inserted into that column. So as an example here, we have a check on the ratings column in a table. So this is like film ratings, and it's saying that any value inserted into this ratings column must be between 0 and 100. So this is like for a Metacritic score or just a rating out of 100. We're only allowed to enter data between 0 and 100 into this column. So this is what the check constraint does. And the last constraint we'll look at is the default constraint. And the default constraint allows you to set a default value which will be entered into a column when you're writing insert into queries. So say you're inserting data into the customers table for the first and last name. If you insert in a blank value for the last name, and the last name column has a default value set to Smith, then it's going to enter Smith for every time you leave that blank. So every time you do insert into John for first name and then blank for last name, it's going to enter the default value, which is Smith. So we have an example here of an email column which has a default value set to no data. So if you're inserting a new customer into your customer table and they didn't provide an email, you could leave it blank, and then the default will set this to no data. So that's it for the different types of constraints in MySQL. When we create our cinema booking system database,